I imagine most people felt the same way I did about Bugsnax upon the reveal trailer. Gee, this looks pretty fucked up in an endearing sense. If nothing else, it would probably be funny. If you then saw that their previous game was Octodad, then you can expect that's the case. The issue now is you might think that because of that, the funny is kind of all there is. Not to say Octodad didn't have genuine gameplay beyond the goofball physics, but I'd be surprised if many would comment much on it beyond that. Unfortunately, games based purely on humor for me have been plagued by Goat Simulator, which came out later the same year, whose substance never went further than look how funny the broken physics are, which gets old after an hour. Bugsnax had two things in its favor in that regard though. The funny aspect was more the absurdity of the premise and little to do with physics or gameplay. The second thing Bugsnax had for me was that it was free on PlayStation Plus for PS5, which I am now an owner of. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have purchased it based on my expectation of humor being the focal point. With that out of the way, Bugsnax is not a funny game. Well, it is a funny game, but it's beyond that. Though the snacks are obviously a prominent feature, they're really just a setting. You play as a journalist who ventures to Snacktooth Island to interview an explorer named Lizbert about the island and its snack inhabitants, and to show them to the world. Upon your arrival, you find that she's gone missing, leaving her assistant Filbo as the only one left in town. As she was everyone's mutual driving force to remain in town and reason for coming to the island, her disappearance caused everyone to separate. You begin to search for each Grumpus to convince them to return to town and interview them to get clues as to Lizbert and her partner Eggabell's whereabouts. This is the story's primer, which makes way for that absurd premise. To get each Grumpus to return to town, you have to feed them the bug snack they desire. In doing so, a portion of their body will transform into that snack. The cutesy identity of the game combined with this bizarre, adorable body horror kind of left me on edge. The gameplay itself is catching those snacks with the tools you're provided. Using your camera, you identify each snack, their likes, their dislikes, and the path at which they're patrolling. Some are simple to start with, requiring simply to leave your cage within their path until they walk into it. Though they have different mannerisms, as some are scared of you, some are aggressive, and some are indifferent, and this will play a part in how you're able to capture them. Some require you to use your slingshot and a specific type of sauce with it, some need to be cooled off or heated up, and some you have to set up a tripwire. You've got a spring launcher, a grapple hook, and a remote-controlled ball to lure the snacks where you want. Despite being on edge from the premise, the gameplay is pretty comfortable. Most of your time is spent analyzing your surroundings and figuring out how to capture them. Since you've no chance of death, even hostile snacks aren't really harmful. When I initially began playing, I wasn't sure how much I would enjoy it. The concept is fine, but I suspected I'd really just be bored. While I'm not going to say the gameplay is some perfected sandbox, I did find myself pretty interested in figuring out how to catch certain ones, laying traps, and getting them all. There are decent little boss fights, a good variety of snacks and their behaviors, and everything felt fluid and good to use. I didn't expect to get much enjoyment out of the moment-to-moment gameplay, and I especially didn't expect an engaging story. Instead, I was surprised to find myself intertwined in the mystery of the story and the interactions between every character. Not just that, but the characters have traits I did not anticipate for a game whose identity is so wacky. I did mention I was on edge playing this. This was mostly because I expected there to be a dark, twisted turn somewhere down the road, but I also expected that to be in the service of an even more fun absurdity, not level-headed and down-to-earth character work. I guess I should explain what I'm talking about. To start, the story does not actually have some crazy twist, or I guess it might depending on whether you actually believed it would remain cute and innocent. It's actually what I expected for the most part. As you bring everyone back to the village and interview them, you're given some items to help ascertain Lizbert's whereabouts. None of them actually know, just that an earthquake had occurred the day that she went missing, but your pieces and their assistants lead you to the top of the mountain where you find Eggabell. She explains that when the earthquake happened, Lizbert fell into a hole in the ground, and she's been working since to find her, which now meant opening a large door into the mountain. You eventually help her get through the door, wherein you immediately fall through the ground. The first thing you'll notice is that the entire cave is made of food. You'll also encounter what seems to be a person made entirely of Bugsnax, which you may have actually noticed in the distance throughout your playthrough. A short trek through the tunnels lead you to an open room with dozens of snacks and one giant mega snack. This is actually Lizbert. She explains a few things. The entire island is Bugsnax itself, and the snacks are parasites. They work to getting the inhabitants to eat them and eventually take them over, which they'd try to do to Lizbert when she fell down, but she fought them off and kept control. The snacks are ravenous, and her efforts to stop them are weakening, and everyone needs to leave the island. Eggabell, finally reunited with Lizbert, decides to join her and stay behind. By the time you make it back, Bugsnax have already begun to attack, and you have to fend them off with the help of all the Grumpuses. You actually can lose villagers here if you're too slow fending off the snacks. The villagers can eventually eat too many and be taken over, which is made more easily possible if you've done all the side quests and fed everyone too many. It's not terribly difficult, I wasn't even aware you could lose anyone, but it is a pretty cool ending. Surprisingly, there's even sequel bait. Regardless of who survives, Filbo joins you in returning to your boss, and they want to cover up the story. You leave, and the player is left with dialogue between your boss, who'd questioned the validity of this venture to begin with, and a mystery character. It seems they knew all along about the island and its dangers, and were working to get Bugsnax to reach the mainland. The last thing you see is a Strabby appearing on the shore. It's not a masterpiece of storytelling, and the part where they turned out to be evil was my expectation going in, perhaps not parasites specifically, but something similar. That said, that doesn't mean I wasn't still like, oh fuck. And even though the mystery was what I figured, every instance of learning what the other villagers know was holding me firmer in place, wanting to find out what happened. Now, all that on its own might not be amazing, but as I said earlier, the character interactions were a major part of why this game kept me going. Everyone is distinct, but not one-dimensional. They don't boil down to just one trait, they have multiple traits that make them all feel more lifelike. But if anything to surprise me in this game, it was representation. Firstly, there are two gay couples. Lisbert and Negabel are a couple and are immediately shown as such before the gameplay even starts. The relationship, along with the others in the game, have their trials and tribulations, but also care and comfort, and is one of the most endearing things in the game, possibly because most of their interactions are seen on recordings done for Lisbert's show. The other is between Chanlo and Snorpy, though it isn't clear immediately. In fact, it's not even clear to Snorpy, who, blinded by his paranoia and conspiracy obsession, saw them as friends with benefits, worried Chanlo didn't care for him further. For the first bit of their introduction, I figured they were just close friends. Chanlo clearly worked hard to care for him, but there was no indication it went further right away. What made the relationship sweet was how worried and anxious Snorpy is as a character and how direct Chanlo could be. One more thing I want to mention was for Snorpy's sibling, Floofty, and yes, I am aware how strange it is talking about this with such ridiculous names. It is technically not specified, but as I was playing I realized characters referred to Floofty as they. Non-binary characters are definitely relatively new in the video game world, and it was cool to see. But for all three of these things, none of them are ever specifically pointed out. For Floofty, everyone just says they. There's no fuss made, people just said it. Same goes for the relationships, they just existed. It was all displayed as a normal possibility, and the characters went along with that, just as they did with the marriage between Triffany and Wambus, who also have their own intricacies. That isn't to say that you can't have a story where these things aren't a topic brought up, but I think it might help with normalization if they just exist without anyone there to naysay. Beyond romantic relationships, everyone has their own little internal problems to solve. Filbo just wants to help everyone but is naturally clumsy and struggles to achieve anything. Beffica is a chronic gossip who has issues maintaining friendships. Cromdo is a con artist who grew up poor and thinks the only way to live his dream is by hustling. Chanlo is obsessed with becoming stronger with the intent to protect Snorpy, who himself is obsessed with the Grumpinati, which extends to him being paranoid about everyone. Him and his siblings' relationship is strained due to Floofty's own scientific experiments being more brash. They're fixated in their pursuit of science and how Bugsnax affects the body, going to dangerous methods to do so. Snorpy, despite their strained relationship, stops a dangerous experiment, which has them question their own methods as they can recognize Snorpy's intellect, finally casting aside their ego. Gramble is timid with a desire to care for Bugsnax, who also had a previous family leave him, which may relate to his confusing relationship with Wiggle, who might just want his Bugsnax rather than him. He also has a bad one with Wambus, a farmer who criticizes Gramble's softness. They also have rivaling ideas for how to farm them. Wambus himself has issues with his own farm work, as well as a strained relationship with Triffany, who herself is dealing with the history of the island's inhabitants, while also searching for signs of her grandmother who had come to the island before. Wiggle was a pop star one-hit wonder before leaving, and she's trying to use Bugsnax as inspiration to make more music. Shelda is a self-claimed guru because she thinks people will listen to her under the spiritual guise, rather than just plain old Shelda. Lastly, you have the seldom seen Lisbert and Agabel. Lisbert is a proud explorer, hungry for adventure, and seems to be very caring. Agabel is also caring, almost to an unhealthy degree. She has a medical background, so taking care of people is her nature, but she often overdoes her concern and worries that she won't be able to help anyone. She's anxious and depressed and blames herself for what happened to Lisbert, but also that she's just a burden to everyone. She trains with Chanlo to be able to join Lisbert on her adventures rather than having to stay behind. She explains that she was showing off her new skills when she almost fell, and Lisbert was saving her when she fell into the mountain. This makes Agabel take helping Lisbert even more personally. A lot of this is explained more through doing each character's side quests, otherwise you wouldn't see a lot of them discuss or engage their flaws. There aren't a ton of them, so it doesn't take much time, but I found myself gravitating to them just to see how things unfolded. I'm not sure if all or any of the side quests are required for the final party, but you're finally able to see everyone dance together and enjoy each other's company, which I thought was a fun moment. Some characters are able to reconcile, like Wambus and Gramble, and for the first time there is a truly happy atmosphere. This leads to the end of the game. It feels pretty silly talking about the more serious and real moments of this game while using the goofy names they've got, which makes this whole package a strong juxtaposition, but that might even work in its favor. That surprise might be why it kept me going so strongly, curious to see what else it would talk about while using such strange avatars. I don't want to end up summarizing basically every conversation, so either play it or trust me that the characters do have a good amount of introspection about their issues beyond what I've said or shown. While I was personally disappointed I couldn't end up saving Lisbert and Eggabell, I have a feeling they'll return in a sequel if that happens, since you last see them saving the village in their new form. Which means yes, I am actually excited for the idea of a sequel to this game. More tools would be nice, and the promise of a larger story with the Bugsnax emerging upon the world could be really cool. So yeah, I give this a pretty easy recommendation. It's a simple, charming game with a surprising touch of character work. And I didn't really touch on the gameplay much, so though I've spoiled the story, there's plenty of little puzzles for you to figure out yourself. As always, thanks for watching. If you'd like to join the discussion further, feel free to join my Discord server listed in the description, and I'll see you in the next one.